Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us on a Sunday morning, August 8, 2021, Global Technopolitics Forum's research team meeting. So we start this meeting, I think, with Dariush. We just published his paper. Some of you are familiar with his work, but Dariush, maybe you want to say a few things about what you did in this project and what was the thought process and where you started, where you ended. Few minutes.
I'm really excited to have this published. Thank you. I mean, I'm really proud of this paper. I think where I started was sort of from my old project, which exposed me to Central Asia when I was looking at Iran, Russia, and China, and sort of uncovering. It's a really like mysterious region. So trying to shed some insight on connectivity there, the trends that are going on in development of the region, who the power players are, and sort of like what the implications of the development there are going to be for the future. And since it's such a big and important region, I think that it doesn't get enough analysis. So I'm really glad that I was able to do that, and hopefully we'll see where it goes from there.
And what is the next plan? What are you planning to do with this now?
With this paper or with the forum generally?
I think with this paper and Haley, maybe you have a plan. Maybe you want to explain that plan. Haley is not with us, but you can explain where it is going.
Yeah, so with Haley, I haven't checked in with her for a while. I don't really know what's going on in terms of the mapping part of the project, but yeah, hopefully the original timeline I got was by I believe she said sometime in the fall semester around November, but I'm not too sure. That's what I remember.
Yeah, basically what I wanted you to explain to everybody is that you're trying now to produce a visual storytelling by mapping out capabilities in the region on various fronts. So we're now...
Yes, and everything like that. Yeah, and that I think is going to make it really a way more impactful.
Yeah, and it's going to be dynamic, so it will be updated automatically. So that's quite going to be useful as well. So we are starting a proposal in China. Greg, maybe you want to say a few things, and anybody who has an input on that, they could add their ideas.
Absolutely. Well, let us try and send something around as soon as possible so we can get people to react to it. This really grew out of a conversation we had with the Office of Net Assessments at the Pentagon. Andrew May is the research director there. And we started talking, I guess I started by musing a bit about the Soviet Union. I remember in the 1970s, Murray Feshbach, who was an eminent economist, demographer, came back from Moscow with numbers that were going in the wrong direction. Male lifespan was getting shorter, not longer, a couple of others. Murray was really a tree person, not a forest person, so he wasn't quite sure what to make of it. And we weren't really very much help. We kind of fell back on stereotypes like, well, Russian men drink too much, or other kind of easy explanations. In retrospect, what he picked up was the sort of dead canary in the coal mine of a pretty sick society. So Andrew said, we can count all these things that China is doing that are impressive, but we don't really have a very good sense for what's going on in the society. Implicitly, he was asking the question, are there trends maybe like those in Russia, maybe not, but in any case, trying to understand more about the society. So that's where we stand. We'd like to turn that into a proposal. We've been trying to think of what are the indicators we would like to look at. Some of them will be quantitative, but my suspicion is this will be mostly qualitative. We'll have to do a fair amount of interviewing, but that's not where we stand. So the idea is really to focus on the societal aspects of China, not the things that usually get counted like tanks and boats and missiles, but to try and see if we can understand the societal trends that are better. So help, comments, suggestions, more than welcome, and we'll get something around as soon as we can. We had a fascinating conversation with Gareth Chang, who's here in Los Angeles, done lots of things in Asia, is Chinese by birth, speaks fluent China, has known all these, has met Xi Jinping and all of the leaders. So will be a good source for us, and he's happy to help. But thoughts about people we should talk to or places we should look, more than welcome.
Yeah, and we will put our proposal, a sketch of proposal, so then everybody's comment will be welcome. But I really like all of you to think about it, and if you had any ideas, we welcome comments. Especially you, Dariush, you worked a lot on that area. Any ideas comes to your mind would be interesting. And I think another issue that I would think about it on that area is public-private partnership. Recent developments which are happening are interesting, so that may be another angle to look at. Do you agree, Greg?
Yes, absolutely. We've seen the recent, I guess, could only be described as a crackdown on the tech sector and the private sector more generally. That looks like it's going to continue. We talked with Gareth some about, isn't that in the end going to be bad for the economy? And who knows? I think the answer there is too early to tell.
Okay, so next we go to, anybody has any comments before I move on? No? Okay, then we move to Firuze. Firuze, would you like to tell us the latest development on your project?
So I was looking a little bit deeper into these different countries. I especially liked Greg's comment on what I uploaded yesterday. It's like, where are we going with this? Because we started with digital penetration in Africa, and
right.
My particular feeling is that if I'm worried that if we look at from top down to look at the internet shutdowns and the throttlings and blackouts and try to correlate it with events in different countries, then we might come up with the wrong conclusions because we're going to miss the context. And to that effect, I am looking a little bit deeper in different countries. We talked about Uganda. I've looked into Sudan. I haven't uploaded that yet. And I've been looking at the countries that have elections just in 2021, which again, I haven't uploaded yet. But one that I found fascinating was Ethiopia, because there is a big war. I don't know if anybody is following it, but I mean, I'm interested in Africa, so I kind of like, I follow the news on Africa. And so there's a war going on in Tigray. I found in Ethiopia interesting because in 2018, this new prime minister came to power, which actually got a Nobel Peace Prize. For being this new generation of African leaders. He was like he's like part Muslim, part Christian. And he was talking about a bigger pan-Ethiopian polity instead of these ethnic divisions. And he lifted the ban on the media. He released political prisoners. The West loved them, and barely 2 years after that, he has reversed course. There's a war brewing in Tigray. There's a humanitarian disaster unfolding. The State Department just issued sanctions, economic sanctions on him, and visa restrictions on his administration. And so if we look at the internet shutdowns, which elections happened, but he had total shutdown on the internet, because in Ethiopia, actually, state has monopoly on the mobile and all the ICT infrastructure. And also they have the ability to target particular regions, which not every country in Africa can do. Sudan can also do that. So they targeted the Tigray, and so if you look at that, you're going to come up with this probably this conclusion that, oh, here we go again, with another African big man who is who's oppressing the marginalized groups in these regions. But looking at this, you find that actually it's much more complex than that. The Tigray were actually the dominant group before he came to power. TPLF, which is the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, were the main players in the ruling party for over 2 decades. They had actually set up this very interesting security system within the country where, okay, absent the Chinese model and the surveillance system, they had party members, millions of party members, 5 or 6 million. Each party member had to inform on 5 people. So this network extended all throughout the country, from the lowest farmer in a village to the student to the businessman to anybody. And so they encouraged that, and they were incentivized to do that. So the farmer would get a plot of land, the student would get pocket money, the businessman would get a loan, you would get jobs in the administration. So everybody was incentivized to kind of collectively work towards this police state that the TPLF actually, as the dominant player in politics, had promoted, and they had a full ban on media. You couldn't criticize anything that had to do with the government. So when Abiy, which is Prime Minister Abiy, is the new Prime Minister since 2018, came to power, he was promoting a state building project. So we're going to be all Ethiopians, no more ethnic divisions, and so in order to do that, he dismantled the coalition party that was composed of these different ethnic groups, and he replaced it with a different party, the Prosperity Party, integrating everybody. But this kind of diminished the role and the power that TPLF had. So they were incensed, and they didn't want anything to do anything with this, and they refused to join this new party, and they kind of retreated back into their stronghold in the Tigray, which is in the north. Now, the north is bordering Eritrea. There has been a border dispute with Eritrea for over 2 decades. They had massive wars. Eritrea was part of Ethiopia at some point, and there was a secessionist movement. And so actually, Abiy got a Nobel Prize because he struck a peace deal with the Eritreans. And so now they are allies. So now with this war breaking out, which it was the TPLF who started this war. It wasn't Abiy. So it's TPLF that started this war. So now, but Abiy asked help from Eritreans, and as well as the Amharan, which is the neighboring region. So they are on one side and the Tigrayans on the other side, and you have this humanitarian disaster unfolding, blockades, millions of people displaced. And so you have to look at what's happening with the internet in this context. State building is a violent process everywhere. And so Ethiopia has had this constitutional form of government that is federal. So each region is independent and were granted self-determination as some sort of a guarantee that you still have your own ethnic identity. Regions are so independent that actually when the Tigrayans make incursions into the Amharan region, and they're both part of Ethiopia, but they make incursions into each other's regions, wanting to take territory from each other, which is interesting. There's a large Somali group in the south, which is bordering Somalia, and there are insurgencies there all the time. So you have a state that is all the time in conflict with like a state building project versus these ethnic self-governing groups that want to retain independence. And there are secessionist movements and there are insurgencies all the time. So taking a back step from this digital question, I think that if we want to look at Africa and democracy, I think we have to me, the digital aspect of it is a smaller element in a bigger context of what is happening with democracy in Africa. Most of these African states got their independence after 1960s. The borders were drawn already by the colonial powers. After, when they became independent, there was a deal struck that nobody would dispute these borders. In exchange, they would become member states of the United Nations. They would get aid, and they would be welcome as a new nation, but they would agree not to dispute the borders. But the reality of the matter is that these borders are artificially drawn. There are ethnic cleavages everywhere, and always ethnicity and your clan trumps anything that has to do with national boundaries. And the state formations that happened in other places in the world, Europe fought for years and years. You had the 30-year wars and the 100-year wars, and state formation happened organically. This didn't happen in Africa. So in a way, the conflicts that we see in Africa are part of that organic process that has happened elsewhere in the world, and now is happening. To complicate matters, there are other things at play. For instance, the war on terror. For instance, in Djibouti, there was an election this year as well. And the president went for 5th or 6th term, I forget which one, uncontested. He got like, he's an undisputed despot. Nobody presses on him for human rights, for elections, for democracy. Why? Because Djibouti has the most important base on the Red Sea across the Gulf of Aden. It's an important maritime route, and it's the most important US military base for the drone operations. So that's where the drones take off for their operations in the Gulf, and as well as for the French. They also have a military base there. So Djibouti is untouchable. So looking at what the internet would be doing there is going to always be like a smaller part of what is happening in the geopolitical picture in Djibouti. Chad, the same thing. Hassan Habre was, there was a coup plot, and Idris Deby came to power. He was in power for 6 terms, and again this year he was elected undisputed. He cracked down on all the opposition. He was killed a week after he was elected. It was an armed struggle from the north, but also Chad is a very important strategic ally for the US in the war on terror. So so there's that element to contend with. Plus, just as during the Cold War, developing states and the autocratic states always used the term, you know, we're fighting communism. Now they use this term, counterinsurgency and war on terror, in order to crack down on dissent in their own countries. So this is where I was going. So that's why I thought it would be interesting and more productive to kind of do some deep dives into these different aspects and pick countries that represent those important aspects of democracy building and what's going on in Africa. And that is why I specifically looked at Chad this week. And not Chad, Ethiopia. I've looked at Chad also, but I didn't upload that. But Ethiopia, I found, considering what's going on all around in that country, I thought it would be interesting. So that's what I had this week.
Thank you. I think the digital corridor may be interesting to look at it. The paper Dariush produced, very different, but somehow there was also a lot of loose ends there, and he kind of put them as alignment and grouped them. I think maybe that would help you in terms of organizing this vast amount of information. The other point I want to make is another thing we learn is that perhaps in these troubled regions, it's not question of leader, it's the power game that's going on in. So you bring the most democratic leader, and it doesn't take them long to be drawn into power games that are played in the region, and they're forced to become authoritarian and dictators. So that's another thing I think we learned from it. Greg, any comments?
Oh, yeah, it's all very interesting stuff. And I think probably, well, I've learned one thing. I've learned that winning a Nobel Peace Prize is not a good idea. So, but it sounds like in some ways the question you're asking, Firouzeh, is really how much does the digital world matter in Africa, given all the other things going on? And maybe that's kind of the driving question. That would be an interesting frame for.
Yes. And that, I think that if we do a paper on this, that would definitely be an element of it. But what I am veering towards is I'm concluding that it is not as big of an element in democracy building as we would wish it to be, because there are so many bigger issues at work that trump that particular.
Which is an interesting conclusion in any case.
Yes.
So yeah.
Yep. Any comment from anybody? No. Paul, do you have any comments on the China project? Because I would like to have your views on that one, the proposal that Greg mentioned. Maybe you want to think about it and come back, but if you have any comments, we're happy to hear.
Okay. No, thanks. I'll give it some thought. I have a few ideas, but maybe I'll firm them up a bit before I share them. But certainly my one immediate thought would be definitely look further afield than Tiananmen Square and Beijing. There's a lot going on in the countryside that would give you the kind of indicators that you're, I think, looking for.
Yeah, thank you. Daniel, we published your paper, Daniel. Thank you very much. And is there any comment you have about anything? Do you want to discuss anything?
I recently sent out just a report I wrote this week, and it's in my drive too. On the White House published a memorandum on critical infrastructure, specifically industrial control system cybersecurity. So exactly what my white paper was talking about and asking for. It's definitely a huge step in the right direction. They published it July 28th. And yeah, there's a lot of good stuff that I kind of marked out in the report. A lot more intense advisement and like collaborative relationship between the public and private sector. And then also Director of Homeland Security is creating an actual like baseline critical infrastructure systems cybersecurity goals. And then with some specifics because each sector of critical infrastructure uses some different like control systems. So they require different, because they have different vulnerabilities, they require some different measures for protection. So they're coming out with a little bit more specific guidelines for specific industries, but they are coming out with a baseline cybersecurity guideline, which is really cool. Nothing in this document points towards enforced regulation, but it's definitely, like I said, a step in the right direction. has a pretty intense collaborative like engagement and just a lot more like responsibility it looks like that the government, or at least the Biden administration, is taking for protecting the private sector, which is cool that it's finally coming to fruition, that it's worth paying attention to.
Yeah.
When did you upload that document?
I just sent it to you guys, but it should be uploaded on the Google Drive.
All right, because I published your previous article, and
Great.
I will look at it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Greg, any comments?
No, I thought the previous one turned out well. I look forward to this. This is interesting.
All right.
As you say, long overdue.
Definitely.
Any comments from anybody? No? Okay, then Puran, you already mentioned what you are going to do, so we are looking forward to receive your report when you're ready. And on that note, since nobody else has any comments, I think I want to thank everybody. Wish you all a wonderful week ahead, and see you next week.
Have a good week, everybody. Take care.
Have a good
care.
week.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.